Extraordinary investigations made by Rudolf Steiner into the invisible worlds revealed something that practically no one in ordinary humanity could understand or consciously perceive. He had penetrated very deeply into the spiritual realms and discovered that you possessed much more than simply a physical body. That in addition to that material body that you could see and touch every day, there was another body, a very real, very palpable, very effective body that was made of pure energy and that he called the etheric body. This etheric body was no ordinary superstition. It was no ordinary religious fantasy. It was a very profound spiritual reality that Steiner had investigated with extraordinary scientific rigor into realms that ordinary material science could not access. And what he had discovered about this etheric body was absolutely extraordinary and very transformative to truly understand who you really were in essence. The etheric body functioned as a very complete and very precise record of everything you had experienced in your life. Everything that his physical body had experienced, everything that his emotions had felt, everything that his thoughts had processed. All of this was recorded very deeply within the structure of his etheric body in a very indelible way. This energy body was like a living archive, a very real record that held the complete story of your life very deeply. While your ordinary mind could forget things, while you could repress difficult memories or simply let them disappear through the ordinary processing of time, your etheric body never forgot anything, never left anything behind. I continued to carry everything very deeply. The structure of the etheric body was something very specific and very complex, according to Steiner. He was not simply an energetic replica of his physical body. It was much more sophisticated than this. It was a very intelligent, energetic structure that possessed its own very real consciousness, its own very deep wisdom, its own ability to process information at levels far beyond what your ordinary conscious mind could access. The etheric body was the intermediary between your physical body and your much higher spiritual dimensions. He was the one who translated spiritual impulses into physical manifestations. It was one that captured the impressions of the world very deeply and stored them in a very organized way for future use. According to Steiner, this etheric body was constantly in movement, in vibration, in renewal. It wasn't a static or dead thing. It was living, dynamic, breathing energetically speaking. It constantly reorganized itself based on what you experienced, what you thought, what you felt very deeply. Each experience left an energetic impression on his etheric body. Each emotion created an energy pattern. Each repeated thought chiseled deeper structure. Over time, your etheric body became a very faithful reflection of your way of life, your way of thinking, your emotional tendencies, your habitual patterns very deeply. The most extraordinary thing was that his etheric body had access to information that his ordinary conscious mind had completely forgotten. You had access to memories you believed were lost forever. He had memories of experiences that his conscious mind had very completely repressed or denied. He had understanding of patterns that his ordinary mind could not see. This energetic body remembered everything. Every word you heard, every look you received, every touch you felt, every situation you experienced. Everything was there, stored very deeply in the energetic structure, waiting to be accessed when you managed to develop the ability to communicate with it. The way Steiner discovered this was through very deep investigation into the invisible worlds. He developed extraordinary abilities to penetrate beyond the ordinary veils of material reality and could observe the etheric bodies of living people with great precision. What he saw frightened and amazed him simultaneously. I saw energetic bodies that were like very complex fields of light around physical bodies. Some of these energy fields were very bright, very vibrant, very pure. Others were too cloudy, too dense, too loaded with emotional weight. And when he looked very deeply into these fields, he could see patterns of energy that corresponded exactly to the events of the person's life, their very deep memories, their stored experiences. A very particular discovery that Steiner made was understanding how very deep traumas were recorded in the etheric body in a very literal way. When a person experiences when something was very traumatic, when I suffered violence or humiliation or very deep rejection, this was not simply a matter of ordinary psychological memory. It literally created very real energetic marks on the etheric body. These energy marks remained there, stored, constantly influencing how the person behaved, how they perceived the world, how they related to other people. The etheric body carried this weight, this load, this traumatic impression very persistently. Conversely, very positive experiences, moments of deep joy, of sincere love, of genuine connection, these were also recorded in the etheric body. It created patterns of very high energy, very luminous, very vibrant. The etheric body stored these moments of beauty, these moments of truth, these experiences of transcendence. And when you were able to access these records in your etheric body, you were able to reconnect with that quality of energy, re-experience that emotion, rekindle that flame that had burned in you. The reason your ordinary conscious mind forgot things was because it had limited storage capacity. The conscious mind had to make choices, which memories to keep accessible, which to set aside, which to repress. She used forgetting mechanism as protection. If you had to remember every suffering, every rejection, every difficult moment with complete clarity, you probably wouldn't be able to function normally. Therefore, your ordinary mind had to select. It had to filter. It had to forget. But his etheric body did not have this limitation. He didn't have to protect himself like this. It kept everything because its structure was much larger, much more complete, much more capable of integrating information. This meant something very deep and very disturbing. It meant you never really forgot anything. That the entire story of your life was alive and active in your etheric body. That events that you believed you had overcome, that you were sure you had left behind, these continued to exist very deeply within your energetic structure. It continued to influence you. He continued to shape his reactions, his fears, his expectations. You might be aware that you had left a situation behind, but your etheric body kept processing, kept carrying, kept remembering. Very practical consequences emerged from this understanding according to Steiner. Many of your current problems, your phobias, your anxieties, your repeated behavior patterns, didn't simply come from your conscious mind. It came from his etheric body. It came from these very deep layers of memory that his energetic body carried. You could try to solve something on a conscious level. You could have very deep psychological insights. You could understand intellectually why you had a problem. But if you couldn't reach and transform the record in your etheric body, the problem kept coming back, kept influencing you, kept sabotaging your efforts. This explained why certain therapies worked in a very superficial way, because it works mainly at the level of the conscious mind. You could have intellectual understanding. You could gain very valuable insights. You could feel temporary relief. But without reaching the etheric body, without transforming that very deep energetic record, the pattern continued to exist at a very deep level. The root of the issue was not removed, only the manifestation was attenuated. Therefore, people often found that their problems returned, sometimes in a slightly different form, but fundamentally the same pattern continued to operate. Methods for communicating with your etheric body existed, and Steiner had investigated several of them very deeply. Very specific and very focused meditation could allow you to access this stored knowledge. When you could quiet your ordinary conscious mind, when you could quiet the constant noise of thoughts, you could begin to feel the whispers of your etheric body. I was able to start receiving the messages he had for you. He was able to begin to access those memories and understandings that his conscious mind had forgotten. Dream work offered another very important access. According to Steiner, during sleep, your conscious mind was less dominant, and your etheric body had the opportunity to communicate much more freely. Dreams were not simply random manifestations. It was your etheric body processing information, working through unresolved issues, offering insights and wisdom. When you learned to work with your dreams very consciously, when you began to remember them, to analyze them, to seek their meanings, you were opening a very important channel of communication with your etheric body. Visualization techniques and active imagination worked very effectively as well. Steiner emphasized that imagination was not ordinary escapism. It was a very real tool for connecting with energetic dimensions of your being. When you visualized something very consciously, when you engaged your imagination very intentionally, you were creating a bridge between your conscious mind and your etheric body. I was able to use this to access memories, to heal traumas, to reprogram very deep patterns. Bodily understanding offered another way. Your physical body and your etheric body were very connected. When you could listen to the sensations in your body, when you paid attention to your very visceral intuitions, to your feelings that you had no words for, you were listening to the messages of your etheric body. This energy body spoke through bodily sensations. It spoke through those belly feelings you had. He spoke through the quality of his energy, his tiredness, his vitality. Significant synchronicities and coincidences that Steiner studied very deeply offered evidence of the work of the etheric body. And when extraordinary things happened in your life, when you met exactly the person you needed to meet at the right time, when you received a message at the precise moment you needed it, this was not merely ordinary chance. It was your etheric body orchestrating events, creating connections, aligning circumstances. Your etheric body had access to information that your conscious mind did not. He could perceive patterns that his ordinary mind could not see. I could know things you had no conscious reason to know. Diseases and physical symptoms had very deep origins, according to Steiner. Often, when you had a health problem, a chronic pain, a recurring illness, a symptom that no one could explain, this was your etheric body trying to communicate something very important. I was trying to say that there was something unresolved, there was stored trauma, there was suppressed emotion, there was a harmful mental pattern that continued to operate very deeply. The physical symptom was a message from your etheric body asking for your attention. This also explained why some people were able to think positive and still remain ill, because it was not a matter of ordinary thinking, it was a matter of what was stored very deeply in the etheric body. If there was trauma, if there was fear, if there were limiting beliefs held energetically, ordinary positive thinking couldn't access that. You had to work on the energetic level. He had to communicate with his etheric body. I had to transform that very deep record. The etheric body's ability to heal itself was extraordinary, according to Steiner. If you could establish true communication with him, if you could offer him understanding and love, if you could work with him consciously, you could release stored trauma. I was able to transform harmful energy patterns. I could very literally rewrite the records I was carrying. This was not merely a matter of mentality. It was a very real energetic process that Steiner had witnessed many times. People who were able to do this work very deeply were able to experience very remarkable healing. Symptoms that lasted for years managed to disappear. Repeated patterns of behavior managed to transform. Emotions that were trapped were able to be released. Relationships that previously seemed doomed managed to change very radically. Because when you were able to access and transform the record in the etheric body, you transformed the root of the problem very deeply, not just the superficial symptom. Another very important aspect that Steiner investigated was the relationship between his etheric body and his past lives. If reincarnation was true, and Steiner had deep research that suggested it was, then his etheric body carried much more than just the memories of this life. It carried impressions from previous lives. It carried patterns that had begun in past incarnations. This explains some very disconcerting things. Phobias that had no obvious origin in this life, extraordinary talents that I had without training, relationships that made me feel like I already knew someone when I did. This meant that part of your story was far beyond what you could recall through your ordinary conscious mind. Your etheric body was the repository of much more history than you had conscious access to. It carried layers of experience that spanned multiple incarnations. He kept lessons that his soul had learned through many lives. The relationship between the etheric body and other, much more subtle bodies was something that Steiner mapped out in great detail. According to him, you were not simply a physical body, it was a series of bodies, increasingly subtle ones. The etheric body, the astral body or emotional body, the causal body or higher mental body, and even much higher bodies. Each of these was in a very specific vibration relationship with the others. The etheric body was a very important intermediary between the physical and the much more subtle. When you slept very deeply, during very deep, dreamless sleep, your etheric body stayed with your physical body while subtler bodies went out into much higher dimensions. This was why you felt so restored after very good sleep, because his etheric body was able to regenerate very deeply during this period. He could clean himself, he could reorganize himself, he could recharge himself very completely. When you had very disturbing nightmares or sleep disturbances, it was often your etheric body trying to communicate something important. It was an energetic body trying to process something unresolved. I had very disturbing impressions that I needed to work on. There were unintegrated things that I was trying to integrate. The etheric body could not fully rest because its work was unfinished. The importance of honoring and respecting your etheric body was a very strong emphasis by Steiner. This body was not merely an ordinary biological machine. It was not merely a carrier of ordinary genes. It was a very intelligent, very real entity. He had his own wisdom. He had his own conscience. He had his own needs and desires. When you could recognize this, when you could honor your body, both physical and etheric, when you could listen to its messages, you could establish a much deeper relationship with yourself. Practicing very conscious presence helped a lot. When you were truly present, when you were able to be here now without constantly being in your past or your future, you were able to connect with your etheric body much more easily. I could feel his energy. I could hear their messages much more clearly. I was able to respond to their needs much more adequately. Presence was a very important key for communication with the etheric body. The fundamental teaching that Steiner offered about the etheric body was that you could learn to work with it consciously, very deeply. It wasn't a question of being special or having extraordinary gifts. It was a matter of developing capabilities that every human being had the potential to develop. First step was recognition. He had to recognize that his etheric body existed. I had to believe it was real and not just metaphorical. You had to understand that it was a very important part of who you really were. Once you recognized the existence of the etheric body, the next step was to start talking to it. It was not merely speaking mentally. It was to address him with respect, with gratitude, with genuine love. It was saying things like, "Thank you for holding all these memories for me. Thank you for protecting me. I hear you now. I'm starting to understand what you were trying to tell me." This type of loving communication was very powerful, because your etheric body had been a very loyal guardian of your history. I had done the best I could do with the information I had. Very specific work with stored memories was able to release very deeply. When you had a very deep traumatic memory, you could go to your etheric body and say that you were ready to work with this. I could ask you to take you through the memory consciously. He could allow himself to re-experience this, but this time with adult understanding, with knowledge he now had, with resources he had developed. Often, simply through conscious reprocessing in this way, the emotional charge was able to release itself very completely. A very effective tool was free writing or very deep journaling. When you wrote without censorship, when you let the words flow without judgment, you were opening a very direct channel of communication with your etheric body. He often found his hand writing things that his conscious mind didn't know he knew. What stories emerged that I had forgotten? What very deep truths appeared that I had repressed? This was your etheric body speaking through your hand, sharing what it had held. Conscious body movement offers another very effective way to work with the etheric body. Free dancing, meditative movement, very conscious yoga, all of these could help your etheric body release stored memories. Because often these memories were not simply psychological, it was stored quite literally in the muscles, in the tissues, in the structure of your physical body. When you were able to move your body consciously, you were able to help your etheric body release this charge very deeply. Food and nutrition had a connection very direct with etheric body too. When you ate very lively, very fresh, very energetic food that had been grown and harvested with care, you were nourishing more than just your physical body. It was nourishing his etheric body as well. Conversely, food that is too processed, too toxic, too lifeless, this weakens the etheric body. It left him less able to process and store information in a very healthy way. Therefore, the conscious eating was very important. Practicing very deep forgiveness was a transformative tool, according to Steiner. When you harbored very deep resentment against someone, when you truly hated someone, it created a very severe blockage in your etheric body. It created a contorted energetic pattern that continued to harm you very constantly. When you were able to process these emotions and come to a place of genuine forgiveness, not superficial, false forgiveness, but very deep understanding that allowed you to release, you were able to release corresponding blockage in the etheric body. This had a very transformative effect on his energy, his health, his life. Relationship with one's own physical body very literally affected the etheric body. When you had a very harsh self-criticism, when you hated your own body, when you abused yourself, this created a very harmful separation between the physical body and the etheric body. This weakened communication between them. This caused the etheric body to have difficulty functioning in a very optimal way. When you started loving your body, honoring it, consciously taking care of it, you could reestablish a very healthy connection. He was able to reintegrate his being very fully. Consistent exercise and regular movement were very important. It didn't have to be intense exercise. It could be meditative walking, gentle yoga, slow dancing. The important thing was to consciously move your body in a regular way. This helped the etheric body to remain active, alive, vibrant. This allowed the etheric body to continually process and release energy instead of letting it all accumulate and crystallize. Patience was a very essential element in working with the etheric body. I had stored things for a long time. It was going to take time to process and release everything. I had to open communication channels with care. I had to honor his rhythm. He had to allow work to happen in his own time. I couldn't force the etheric body to reveal itself or release things it wasn't ready for. But with persistent patience, with genuine compassion, with consistent dedication, he could transform very deeply. Understanding that your etheric body remembered everything was liberating, according to Steiner, because this meant you never really lost anything. That every experience you had lived, every moment of joy, every moment of pain, every learning, every mistake, was alive and active within you. It was accessible if you could develop the ability to communicate with your energy body. This means that wisdom your soul had learned was there, stored very deeply, waiting to be remembered and integrated. Many of his talents, his natural inclinations, his extraordinary abilities came from this very deep reservoir of etheric body memory. The pianist, who can play perfectly without ever learning, was accessing past life memories through the etheric body. The artist, who has crystal clear vision, was connecting to the stored visual archive very deeply. The healer, who could intuitively know where and how someone was hurt, was consulting the accumulated wisdom stored in the etheric body. This also explained intuition phenomenon very clearly. Intuition was not an incomprehensible mystery. It was your etheric body talking to you. It was that deeply held knowledge emerging to the surface. His etheric body had accessed patterns that his ordinary conscious mind could not see. He saw connections that his ordinary logic couldn't make. He felt truths that his reason could not understand. When you learn to trust your intuitions very genuinely, you were learning to trust the wisdom of your etheric body. Recurring dreams had special significance, according to Steiner. When you had a dream that returned many times, often with variations, this was your etheric body trying to communicate something very important that you were refusing or unable to hear while awake. It was your energetic body's insistent way of saying, this still needs to be resolved. This is still affecting you. Pay attention now. When you were finally able to understand the message of your recurring dream, when you were able to work through it until resolution, often the dream disappeared because the message had been received. Synchronicity that Steiner described IA was not merely ordinary chance. It was language through which your etheric body communicated with the universe, and the universe communicated with you. When you had an absolutely perfect date, met exactly the right person at the right time, received exactly the information you needed when you needed it, that was your etheric body orchestrating it. He had knowledge that his conscious mind did not have. He could see patterns that his ordinary mind couldn't see. I could align you with what you needed very deeply. People who had greater access to their etheric body were able to live with much greater grace, according to Steiner. I was able to navigate life with much greater ease because I was operating from much more complete knowledge. It was connected to much deeper wisdom. It was working from a place where it could integrate much more information, much more quickly. He was able to learn from his experiences much more fully. I was able to avoid repeating the same mistakes because I could access a complete record of what I had learned. Working with color and sound offered additional, very effective ways to work with the etheric body. Different colors had different frequencies that resonated with different parts of your etheric body. Different sounds had qualities that could release very specific energetic blockages. Sound therapy, color baths, color meditation, all of this could help the etheric body to harmonize, to cleanse itself, to express itself very fully. The importance of understanding that your etheric body was wise was a central emphasis that Steiner offered. It was not merely a repository of a traumatic waste. It wasn't just a storehouse of pain. It was very real intelligence that had tried to protect you, that had tried to keep what you needed, that had tried to communicate what you needed to know. When you began to honor this, when you began to respect this, when you began to be grateful for this, you could transform your relationship with your own body. He managed to transform his relationship with himself very profoundly. The final realization that came when you learned to work with your etheric body consciously was extraordinarily liberating. You discovered that you had access to much more wisdom, much more power, much more capacity than you believed you possessed. He discovered that his apparent limitations often came from blockages in the etheric body that he was able to release. He discovered that he could heal himself in ways that he had previously believed were impossible. He discovered that he had much more control over his own life, his own reality than he had ever understood. His energy body was remembering everything. Every detail was saved. I was loading each story. I've been waiting very patiently for you to finally start listening, finally start understanding, finally start working with him consciously. And when you could do that, when you could really connect with this very deep intelligence within you, your life could transform very completely. I was able to awaken abilities that I had forgotten I had. You could remember who you really were very essentially. He was able to start living in a way that was much more aligned with his true nature and his true purpose.